all of you to research project, your third research subject while you're in senior high school. I know you've learned to love research already. I know. I can already feel it from over here. I could see it in your eyes how excited you are to take on two more research subjects this school year. For sure, Sean is really shaking his head. No? Yes, sir. I can't wait. That's the kind of vibe I'm really getting from Sean. I know that you've heard of quite a number of things from last year's, or not heard. I don't know. Do you have any idea of how last year's batch dealt with this subject? Have they told you of anything? Did they share anything to you? If they shared something to you, let not yourselves, did I just use that structure? Let not yourselves be biased towards research. I mean, you've had your share last year. I don't know with you, but if I were you when you had your research on a hardbound paper, I would feel accomplished. I would actually feel accomplished because not every school last school year was able to have a hardbound research paper. Originally, that's how schools are supposed to conclude a school year for grade 11, to have an output for research. But you managed to really successfully do that. Not every school had done that. You should be proud of yourselves. You should give yourselves a pat on the back. You should applaud yourselves for having accomplished that output given the challenge of the pandemic, right? It's not as simple as you going to someone else's house whenever you feel like you are allowed, you whenever you feel like doing so, because there are restrictions from last year. Yes, James, you raised your hand. Here's a question from James. How's our research output, sir? I haven't heard of it since the time it was passed. They are existing. They are alive. Your hardbound papers are here. In fact, if the grade 11 students now would wish to borrow a copy, I'd be willing to lend to them your copies of the research. Because your output is an academic output. You should be proud of your outputs. Sir, our outputs aren't free of any mistake. We are aware, sir, that there are mistakes in our work. So what? So what? Whosoever looks at a research will most probably find a mistake in it. I even saw one in my own research, and it was already on a hardbound copy. When I saw your papers, when I saw the hardbound researches, of course there are areas for improvement, and that's what makes research a continuous process. There are weaknesses in our research, sir, in our write-up. And of course, when a reader looks at it, that reader needs to learn from that weakness and will make that weakness the point of improvement. That's what makes research ongoing, progressive by nature. This time, we are still going to tackle on, I know that you've had your experience of research last year, but for the meantime, we are going to go back to the basics of research. I'm going to do a sharing of a screen of a PowerPoint presentation. PowerPoint presentation research. Like that. Let's give it a few minutes or a few seconds. It's taking forever. I don't know. I hope everybody could see this already. Can you? Okay. And I also hope everyone has a copy of the module na. Okay. Let us start with this. Introduction to research, with the inclusion of basic and applied research. So let's start by looking at the definition of research. Oh, look at that. Oh, it's a pull to the side Slide, pull to the side. See what happened there? Look again, now look. Oh, I feel like I pulled something out of the side. Once again, we are introduced to the definition of research, etymological definition. How do we pronounce this word? I respect your pronunciations, but it's this. If you of course go for Google pronunciation of this, you'll find one. But for the meantime, we'll respect whatever pronunciations you have. But we are really after of the correct spelling of this French word. And this French word means to search after or investigate. And again, I'd like to remind you that when you are asked to give the etymological definition of research, the place of origin should be there. The word original term should also be there. And the meaning of that word should also be provided. It's not enough to say, etymologically speaking, research means to search after or investigate. That's not enough. In its etymology, research comes from a French word, which means to search after or investigate. So look at those important components to be included in the etymological definition. Again, should you be asked to provide the etymological definition? We continue. In its complete definition, research is seen as a patient investigation, systematic, and also a careful one. Why is research taken as a patient investigation? It is a patient investigation because it deals with time. There are researchers that could be finished in a short span of time. There are also researches that would take longer perhaps than 1 year or 2 years for it to be accomplished. Also, a researcher needs to establish so much patience because not everything goes his or her way while doing research. Expectations and hopes are set, I know, but we cannot expect for them to happen all the time. What if James wants to gather data from this particular locality, yet it started to rain heavily, or there was no commute at the time available? Does that mean that James will have to just give up? He has to wait and continue on waiting. Or else, he won't succeed in his research. What if Josh Ray gave, for sure so many of you had this experience last year. Josh Ray gave a questionnaire to someone, and that person did not return the questionnaire right away. Does that mean that that person will just be removed from the list of participants or respondents? Ideally speaking, that should not be done. Because that person has already been listed as a qualified respondent for the research. By virtue of patience, the researcher really has to wait for that questionnaire to be given to him or her, given back to him or her. To continue, research is a systematic investigation. Research follows a particular series of steps or procedures. One cannot just jump from whatever he or she wishes to do, because in doing so, the data that's yielded in research might just end up to be invalid or unreliable, which would also be reflective of the reputation of the researcher. And surely we do not want that. As much as possible, we want to establish a reputation of ourselves where people see us as members, qualified members of the research community. The systematic characteristic of research provides that once procedures are identified, the researcher subscribes to those procedures and steps. Lastly, research is identified to be a careful investigation as it deals with particular crucial data or information that yield some form of interpretation. That set of data cannot and must not be trampled with, cannot be altered in case it goes against with the expectations of the researcher. Just because it went against the expectation of the researcher doesn't mean that it can be modified. It has to stand on its own because that's the data that came, that's the rawness of the data that came from the respondents. Oh, look at that. Did you see that? Again. Sound effects. Characteristics of research. Research is empirical as it is taken from observation and experience, especially from that of the researcher. The researcher capitalizes on whatever experience he or she has. And in fact, that experience could probably be the reason on why the researcher ended up choosing a particular topic or problem. For instance, why would you want to study on how music influenced someone's grade? Then someone would say, the researcher might say, it's because I found out that when I listen to music, I end up getting good scores in exams. See, it's taken from experience. Or it's because I noticed that the top achievers in our class listen to music while studying. Experience and observation have come out to be the basis for the choice of a topic of inquiry. Next, research is a logical undertaking. It follows procedures and principles that govern that activity. Remember the principle of parsimony? I made mention of this last year, the principle of parsimony. What does the principle of parsimony tell us? Anyone? What does that mean? James. Correct. Conciseness, brevity, without compromising content. Because there may be others who'd say, sir, are we really forced to make our output really short? If it can be done without compromising content, then do it. Research in the first place is not a contest of length. It will never be. Just because someone's research is thick doesn't mean that it's a very good research output. The principle of parsimony even suggests that a shorter research paper is believed to be more comprehensive. So we are not right away all the while required to make long researches. You'll find that the format you'll do this semester is one that could be finished with like 30 pages, including the cover page and the appendix entries. There were, from last school year, first sem of the last school year, there were a few who did their researches with only like 21 pages, 23 pages, which already included the title page, the table of contents, the abstract. Because again, the principle of parsimony still applies. There's another principle in research. I shared this to my grade 11 class earlier. The principle of beneficence. The principle of beneficence tells us that when we do a research, when we choose a research problem, it is on the premise that responding to that problem is going to be beneficial to a particular group of persons. Where is this in your research format last school year? This is your significance of the study. Remember that part of your paper? You identified groups whom you believe will be benefited by the conduct of your research. You don't do research because you are going to be selfish of what you'll discover. You'll do research because you want to address a concern, which is also to benefit, that addressing that concern is going to benefit the people around you or the community where you belong. Or also the research community where you are sharing your work. Research is a cyclical process. It starts with a problem and ends with a problem. And that problem yields another problem. And so the process goes on. For instance, Rodney wants to study on again how music influences someone's grade in a particular subject. Let's assume that it's someone's grade in mathematics. So the research was done for 1 year, results came out. And then Alan came into the picture. Alan told himself, will this be the same case if the subject's going to be different? What about in English? Well, see, the research of Rodney yielded a problem which Alan formulated. And the process now goes on. Then came Alan's result of the research. And Rand's came into the picture. What if the subject is not just English, done with math, not anymore with English? What if we do it with a science subject? And the process goes on again as a cyclical process for research. Analytical. Research is also analytical because the choice of procedures in research happens to be well thought of, well supported. Familiar of your research design in chapter 1? There you stated the study is a comparative study. The researchers used this design because you gave a justification. That's what you did last year. Which means that you did not just choose that design randomly. You chose a design because it's that design which best fits or suits your research topic. Research is also a critical activity. It's one that requires or exhibits a careful and a precise judgment. That judgment or interpretation is what you'll eventually share. That judgment or interpretation is what yields or leads to a product or output that you'll share to the research community. How you make of that product or output is really crucial, which can be traced to the critical characteristic of research. Obviously, research is also methodical because of the process and step-by-step procedures that researchers have to follow while doing research. And again, for the last time, research is replicable. I couldn't emphasize this enough. The replicability of research is allowed. We do not tolerate, though, duplications in researches. It was already learned that last time, when we duplicate a research, we are not doing anything new, nor are we trying to incorporate something new in our research. Replication allows that, though. Like the example that I had earlier with music and those subjects, Rodney was the first to do it with music to math. Then Alan came, music to English. Then came Rance, music to science. The three of you may end up having the same procedures because Alan accepted the procedures of Rodney, Rance accepted the procedures of Alan. So you looked at each other's procedures, but you did not study on the same subject. So there is something new in each of your setups. And that's the kind of subject being involved. That is the replicability of research, not duplicability. Duplication is Rodney did music to math, and Alan did the same with the same students, same lessons. So there's basically nothing new. What's new to expect? There's none. So that's duplications. That's a duplication. Questions so far? Questions. Let's proceed. Oh, see that? Oh my God. See the movement? Again. Sound effects. I provided the sound effects. Now we will deal with a contrast of basic research and applied research, starting with basic research. This is also known as pure or fundamental research. It is just aimed at the formulation of a theory or concept. And this does not concern itself with the application or practical application of the theory or knowledge that has been formulated. It is just on the knowing of a concept. In fact, assignments that you did when you were in your younger years, when perhaps in spelling you were told search for the meanings of the following terms, or you were requested by the teacher to make a term paper on the concept of Marxism. And then you went online, you browsed online, you went for books, you browsed for answers. Without any regard for the application of that knowledge, what you did is basic research, which is still a form of research. This kind of research tries its best to expand your understanding of a particular theory. In contrast to that, see that again. In contrast to that, we have applied research. The goal of applied research is to find a solution for an immediate problem. When can we say that a problem is immediate? First possible condition, if it's a problem that affects you on where you are actually situated. Second, it could also be an immediate problem if it's a pressing one, meaning it's a problem that should be addressed right away because its impact or effect is quite distressing or unfortunate that not responding or solving it will make life not good, worse perhaps. And so in applied research, you try to find a solution. In here, knowledge is there is now a practical application of the knowledge that is formulated or learned. You could say that applied research could come out as the continuation or extension of basic or pure or fundamental research. We can also look at the differentiation this way. This is more or less the end now. Yeah. In terms of purpose, basic research is done for the creation or expansion of knowledge, while applied research aims for the giving of solutions to specific problems. In terms of context, basic research is self-initiated, while the conduct of applied research could probably be by the sponsors or clients that have requested for the research to be done. Like what I shared to you regarding my experience of doing research in Panglao. That was sponsored by Japan Airports Consultancy Incorporated. So there is a sponsoring group or a client that has requested for the research to be done. They also vary in terms of methods. Internal validity is the concern of basic research because it is just a matter of how the researcher gets satisfied of the information that he or she will have obtained. Example, search on the make a term paper on Marxism. And then the student who does the research on Marxism determines how satisfactory the output is to him as the one who searched for information regarding Marxism. But for applied research, since there is a question on how to solve a problem or issue, someone else has to see in a different light how that solution gets to solve the problem. It's not enough for the researcher to do it him or herself. Because the researcher is in fact perhaps the one who proposed the solution or he's working at the proposal. So it could be that there is a set of government officers or non-government organization officers who will look at the problem and its solution. They will determine if that solution really fits the problem at hand. Concerning now with external validity. That's the introduction to research in the differentiation between basic and applied research. Any question? Yes, Alan. Here's a statement from Allen. Sir, is it also safe to say that research is a careful investigation because of the data, that if you do something wrong with the data, the ones that come after it will also be wrong? That actually makes sense. It really does. That is why you cannot just tamper with the data. Because if you do, just look at the statements that come after it. Let's proceed. You've had your experience of chapter 2. So let's assume that you tampered with the data. What's going to happen to the analysis? Are you assured that the analysis remains to be valid? What happens to the interpretation? What happens to the conclusion of the research? All of those turn out to be questionable now. And that poses a very, very big problem on the research. And when the paper comes out to be questionable, you cannot blame the readers. They'll also question the researchers. Yes, Alan, it really makes sense. Research being a careful investigation really has to do with the data. Anything else regarding the research, the research introduction and basic and applied research? What did you do last year? Basic or applied? Let's go to that. What did you do last year? Basic research or applied research? Josh. Basic research? What was your study, Josh? Sorry because I already forgot what your researches are. Sorry. Yes. If it's one that is required by the curriculum of the school, it's now up to you to consider that to be probably self-initiated, because later on you will still have to gauge how satisfied you are of the output or not. You could also qualify it as one that is, you cannot also call as the client or the sponsor, but perhaps one that's required. That is why this brings me back to your research last year. What did you do? Basic or applied? What was your study again, Josh? Sorry, because I kind of lost track of what your problems were from last year. Okay. Ocean jet. It's alright. Perceptions on bullying. The study of Josh wanted to know how people see bullying in itself. So, came the term perceptions. Did the study of Josh want to address the issue on bullying, like solve the issue on bullying in the school or with the students concerned in the study? It didn't go as far as that. I think so, Josh, no? It didn't go as far as that yet. And so, Josh just did an expansion of knowledge. Because people have, in the context of bullying, people already have perceptions. But here comes now the study of Josh to give readers an idea of how students perceive the concept of perception, expanding the reader's viewpoint of what perception is. Yes, your work qualifies as a basic research. Is there someone who did, what is this? An applied research? I think no one, no? One from last year did an applied research. And I think that's fine. Because again, research could either be basic or applied. I could recall in my capstone, when I taught in one of the schools in the city before, in my capstone research, there was one group They call themselves. It's a group of girls, three ladies, and then they created a mechanism that could utilize water and improve irrigation. I forgot Jane Buendia's. They could utilize water, and I think that's something to do with create. It's not it's not also a form of hydroelectric power, but they used the concepts of mechanical engineering to help. Yeah, I think it has something to do with irrigation in a particular locality. So they created a model. They created a model, a miniature of the entire setup, which they are willing to propose to him to help improve the irrigation in a particular locality. What kind of research is that? Is that just going to be applied? Is that just going to be basic? Or is that one that goes for an applied kind of research? Sean. That now goes to one that becomes applied. Because it's not just on the creation of a concept, but they're trying to address an issue on irrigation. And so they created a model which they had presented. It's in the book. It's contained in one of the many books of researches that I have here. It's conducted by Jane Buendia, Princess Salicid, and I forgot the other girl in the group. There were three girls, and then they're the only mechanical engineering student. That's the only mechanical engineering research that I had in my pile of researches. That's an applied research. So we are free. We are kind of free to choose. Do we do basic research? Do we do applied research? The good thing here is, if for the meantime, if at the moment we decide to doing basic research, there will always be an opportunity to further extend that into becoming an applied research. Basic research is not an end in it's not just it's good if we do not see basic research only an end in itself. We can make basic research a means to achieve an applied research. Like, what if right now Josh, was it Rands who was your pair last year, Josh? Okay. In the context of bullying, what if right now Josh and Rance would wish to deal with a bullying type of research, but on the applied undertaking? They can. Because they already had their share of a basic research from last year. Talking of bullying. And what if they'll proceed into doing an applied research this year or this semester? Questions? Any question regarding the discussion for intro to research? Again, with basic and applied research included. Sir, for this subject, sir, what do you require? Is it that since we did basic research, we should do applied research now? Or can we still stick to basic research, sir? Or sir, is it applied in all of our researches? Last year, the group of RISA, the batch of RISA did a research that is not aligned yet with a particular strand with a particular strand that they are a part of. We reserve that for the second semester. When you do your second semester research this school year, you need to pick on a topic that reflects the strand where you belong. Meaning, if you are a STEM student, you should do a research related to STEM. If you're a HUMS student, you should do a research that's related to the humanities and social sciences. This semester, that's not yet a requirement. This semester, you will do a research different of a topic different from what you did last year and of a different format. What do I mean by different? If you've done perceptions on bullying last year, you should not anymore do perceptions on bullying this year. I mean, that's me giving my requirement in this subject. Sir, can I talk of perceptions in another subject, in another topic? Yes. Sir, is it all right for me to do a research aligned with STEM? Yes, you can. But that's not yet really my requirement because that's a strict requirement for next semester's research. But if you want to start doing one now, it's fine. Yes, James. To make the question of James, because like what I said earlier, I'm supposed to reiterate the video, the questions. If we do a STEM-based research now, sir, can we continue this for the next semester? Here's what's going to happen this year, this semester, James. The format this sem has a beginning and has an end. So the format this sem must really have a finished research. And the same goes with the research that you'll do during the second semester. It really needs to be finished. And it doesn't mean that what you did in the first sem will just be repackaged in the format of next semester's research. Yes, James? You'll end up doing two researches. Because the output you'll do this sem will be collated in one hardbound. And that's the compendium of your researches. Class research. Sorry, a compendium of class researches. While individual hardbounds will be submitted next semester. Next semester, your research has 5 chapters. That beats your 3 chapters from last school year. This semester, the format has no chapter labels at all. I will not allow the doing of chapter labels, chapter numeric chapter labels. We don't have a chapter 1, a chapter 2, and a chapter 3 this sem. Next sem, we'll have chapter 1 to chapter 5. Again, if you want to do a research this sem that's aligned to your strand, it's fine. Sir, what does that mean? If you want to do a bacteria-related research and you have means of accomplishing it, you can. Is there someone from the STEM group who has access to a bacteriology laboratory? Because there's one in HNU. But that would mean asking for permission, and I don't know if any student can just enter the campus for the doing of a bacteriology research. Sir, what about we pattern our research from the researches done last year when they were in grade 12? What did the studies of last year talk about? There were studies last year that for the STEM group has STEM group. There were studies last year that talked of fertilizers. Like they wanted to compare an organic fertilizer with a non-organic fertilizer. That's a STEM-related kind of research. That will actually yield one that's experimental in nature. And again, that's related to STEM. If you want to do that, that's fine. For the humanities group, Majoy's research is the only... Joyce Nilohol, she did a HUMS-related research only during the second sem. During the first semester, she actually worked together with Raisa. And Majoy, though as a HUMS student herself, at that time, worked on a STEM-related kind of research, which is on fertilizers. For the humanities students, for the HUMS class or HUMS group, you can do a research that is related to behavior. So perceptions can come in. Like you want to deal with attitudes, perceptions, experiences of people. They are at your disposal. However, if you end up being grouped with, if your pair, because diba, I said it last time, this will be in pairs with the fifth group being composed of a triad. I know that you want to do individual researches. Let's reserve that for the second sem. So as for you not to be really burdened with research this year, you do the sharing of the burden for the second sem. You carry it by yourself during the second sem. I'm sorry. You do the sharing of the burden during the first semester. You carry it on your own during the second semester. The pair might be composed of a STEM and a UMS student. STEM and UMS. You decide. Will we do one that's related in STEM or will we do one that's related to UMS? You're free to decide. Anyway, again, for this semester, the research is not to be strictly aligned with the strand where you belong. It's fine if you're a STEM student, even if, for instance, I pair Sean and James. Both are STEM students, and they decided to take on one which falls under UMS. That's still fine. What if Sean and James would decide, sir, we are going to study on the attitudes of students towards the use of Google Meet for the first quarter. That's not related to STEM. That's related to a humanities and social science kind of research. The ones doing it are STEM students, that's fine. What if I pair Rod and Josh? And then the both of them decide, sir, we are going to compare two batteries. And then we are going to no, not batteries. That's too elementary. Sir, we're going to create a fertilizer. Sorry, in reference to my reference would be the reference studies of last year, ha? Sir, the both of us are going to create a fertilizer, sir. This fertilizer will be composed of what is this? Dried leaves of this particular plant. And we will compare it, sir, to a commercially available fertilizer. That's not more into UMS, rather that's into STEM. Conducted by two UMS students. That's fine. Because again, this research is not particular of a strand. This subject is not particular of a strand. Anyway, as for the rest of the mechanics on how to do the research requirement, we'll have the rest of that in the weeks to come. For the meantime, do we have questions regarding intro to research and basic and applied researches? If there's none, we can call it a day for now. Thank you and God bless grade 12. By the way, in the video recording, your goodbyes and thank you cannot be heard.